Welcome. This module will define some of the key terms used in the R2 standard and explain the structure of the standard and how it applies to facilities. While the intention of this training module is to increase understanding of common R2 terms, it's not intended to be used as a standalone guide. For the official list of R2 definitions, download the R2v3 standard from the SARI website. Electronic equipment. In the R2 standard, electronic equipment generally includes any type of equipment, components, or materials that are designed primarily to store, process, or convey information electronically, and any accessories to such equipment. So while a refrigerator or microwave oven are electronic devices, they're not primarily information or communications technology, and therefore not considered electronic equipment as defined by the R2 standard. Focus materials, also referred to as FMs, are materials in electronic equipment that warrant greater care during handling or processing due to their toxicity and the adverse effects they can have on workers, the public, and the environment if not properly managed. Focus materials include polychlorinated biphenyls, which are also referred to as PCBs. It's important to note that whenever the term PCBs is used in the R2 standard, it is always referring to polychlorinated biphenyls and not printed circuit boards. Also, mercury, CRT glass, batteries, except for alkaline batteries that do not contain mercury, and all circuit boards, regardless of lead or mercury content. For more detailed information on focus materials, see the expanded definition and table on page 7 of the R2v3 standard. Control of electronic equipment, components, or materials begins at the point where and when the R2 facility takes title, physical possession, or contractual obligation for the electronic equipment, components, or materials, regardless of ownership. For example, this could include brokered deals, or management of electronics that do not physically pass through the R2 facility, or management of electronics not owned by the facility, such as warranty repairs and return programs. Downstream vendors are the buyers or other entities to which an R2 facility transfers control of used electronic equipment, components, or materials. For example, transferring electronics for reuse, refurbishing, demanufacturing, processing, or materials recovery. The downstream recycling chain refers to all the downstream vendors that handle electronic equipment, components, or materials that have passed through an R2 facility or its control. The recycling chain extends through final processing for focus materials or to the first tier of downstreams for non-focus materials. R2-controlled streams are electronic equipment, components, or material streams that are subject to the requirements of the R2 standard for processing and disposition. For example, unevaluated equipment, components, and materials, unsanitized devices or media, items that are directed to test and repair, focus materials, and items containing focus materials. Table 1 of the R2 Equipment Categorization Guide, also referred to as the REC, has a more detailed description of R2-controlled streams. Unrestricted streams are defined as electronic equipment, components, and material streams that do not require R2 processing or downstream vendor verification. For instance, new electronics that are unopened and in the original packaging, or items that do not meet the R2 definition of electronics and are outside the scope of R2 requirements. Electronics, as defined by the R2 standard, is limited to information or communications technology. Also, non-focus materials. Table 1 of the R2 Equipment Categorization Guide, also referred to as the REC, has a more detailed description of unrestricted streams. Data is defined in the R2 standard as the private, personally identifiable, confidential, licensed, or proprietary information contained on an electronic device or memory component. All data on devices or components requires secured management and sanitization. General information, on the other hand, is defined as publicly available information or information that is provided with the original electronic equipment from the manufacturer. General information does not require sanitization. The R2 standard defines sanitization as the removal and destruction of data from a data storage device, such that data recovery using generally available software or techniques is prevented. Sanitization includes logical destruction of data, often referred to as data wiping or erasure, and physical destruction of data from the storage device. Sanitization also includes removal of all user labels, markings, and activity logs. While not a definition, there's an important distinction to understand regarding the two sections of the standard that address data. The first section is Core 7, Data Security. The requirements in this section apply to all R2 facilities and focus primarily on the physical security and sanitization of data. The other section is Appendix B, Data Sanitization, which builds on the Core 7 data security requirements. The additional requirements in Appendix B apply only to facilities that perform logical data sanitization, also known as data wiping, and provide other enhanced services such as detailed inventory tracking, reporting, and additional security controls. A more comprehensive list of terms and definitions can be found on pages 6 through 10 of the R2v3 standard. Next, let's take a look at the structure of R2v3 and how it applies to facilities. Not all facilities in the electronics reuse and recycling industry perform the same activities or offer the same services. Some R2 facilities are very specialized and may focus exclusively on a single process or material stream, while other facilities are more full service and engaged in many different types of processing activities. Because of the specialization within the industry and the diversity of business models, the requirements in R2v3 are organized into two categories: core requirements that apply to all R2 facilities and process requirements that apply only to facilities that are engaged in specific processes. The core requirements apply to all R2 facilities and address those 10 key areas that are intended to ensure the safe, secure, and sustainable management of used electronics from the moment they enter the control of an R2 facility. The process requirements in R2v3 each apply to a specific R2 process. These requirements are in addition to the core requirements and apply only to facilities that are performing these specific processes. Each R2 facility will have at least one applicable process requirement. For example, a collector that sends all equipment to downstream vendors for repair or recycling would need to certify to the Appendix A requirements for verifying the downstream recycling chain. Other facilities may perform all of these processes and would need to certify to all process requirements. Facilities that are certified to any of the additional process requirements will have them listed on their R2 certificate. There is also a companion document for the R2v3 standard, the R2 Equipment Categorization Document, also referred to as the REC. This is a reference document that is to be used in conjunction with the R2 standard. It has standardized categories for identifying the status of equipment throughout processing and functioning product categories to identify the cosmetic condition and level of functionality of equipment and components that are directed to reuse. The REC also defines the next R2 processing paths. While the use of the REC is necessary to conform to other requirements in R2v3, the REC itself contains no auditable requirements. It is strictly a reference document. To learn more about the requirements in the R2 standard, visit the R2 Knowledge Base for a library of on-demand training videos and resources. To be alerted when important updates or training resources are added, follow us on LinkedIn.